Is on fraction basics. We're going to go over all those kind of basic things about fractions that lead up to our fraction unit. All right, so first of all, equivalent fractions. So remember, equivalent is just another word for equal. So fractions are equivalent as long as they represent the same actual value or piece, right? So you got half, 2/4, 3/6. The way you find equivalent fractions is you're just multiplying the numerator and denominator by the same thing. So if I were to take the fraction 2/7, if I wanted to find equivalent fractions, all I have to do is multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same thing. So 4/14 would be equal to 2/7. Okay, because it gets simplified. You can also divide the numerator and denominator by the same number. As long as you're dividing or multiplying by the same number, then they'll be equivalent, because this is like multiplying times 1. 2/2 is 1. So that's why it works, multiplying and dividing by the same number, because you're really just multiplying or dividing by 1, which, remember, multiplying by 1 doesn't actually change the number. So it's just changing the form of the number. So I want you to go ahead and pause the video and figure out what all these in values have to be to make these two fractions equivalent. Okay, so let's check your answers. So this first one, you notice the pattern is times 3. So times 3, that means this would have to be 12. This pattern, they divided by 3. So to make this n have to be 15. This one, they divided by 7. So that would make this n have to be 4. And this one, they multiplied by 10. So that would make this n have to be 440. So that's equivalent fractions. Putting fractions in order from least to greatest, you can use equivalent fractions to find common denominators. So we got 3/4, 5/6, and 7/18. 5/6 and 7/18, so you can pretty easily make 5/6 into 15/18, right? If you multiply by 3 and by 3. So we have 15/18 and 7/18. Then we have 3/4. Now the problem is 3/4 doesn't go into 18 very easily. So what else could we do? So we could double both of these. Let's say we made it 36 as our common denominator. So that means this is times 2, so that's 14, 36. This would have to be times 6, 30, 36. And this is times 9, 27, 36. So now, having the common denominator, you can clearly see based off the numerators what the order goes in. So our original 7/18 is clearly the smallest because it's only 14 here. Then we have 3/4, so that's the 27, and we have 5/6 because it was the 30. So that's putting our fractions in order from least to greatest. So go ahead and pause it and try this one on your own and then hit play to check your answer. All right, so if we're looking at this, an easy common denominator you hopefully noticed was 30. So I'm going to do this times 6, so that's 24 30ths. The next one times 3, so 21 30ths. Times 5, 25 30ths. And times 10 is 10 30ths. So this one, there's a really obvious lowest one over here, 10, right? So the 10 is the lowest, our 1/3. Then we have 21, which is our 7/10. The 24, which is our 4/5. And 25, which is our 5/6. So some of these are very similar, very close. So it's helpful to find that common denominator to make sure you're putting them in order and not just guessing what looks the smallest, what looks the biggest. All right, improper fractions and mixed numbers both represent numbers greater than 1. Okay, so improper fraction means the numerator, which is the top number, is greater than the denominator, the bottom number. Whenever I give you a test back, you're always hoping your fraction score will be this, because that means you got the bonus right and you got more points right than it was out of. Okay, so our numerator is greater than the denominator. So example, 5/4, right? Our numerator is greater than our denominator, and it represents a number greater than 1. Mixed numbers are just a combination of a whole number and a fraction. Combination of a whole number and a fraction. So the nice thing about improper fractions and mixed numbers, they mean the same thing, so you can convert between them. So 5/4, if I were to write that as a mixed number, is really 1 and 1/4. So it's a combination whole number and fraction. But both of these represent numbers greater than 1. Represent numbers greater than 1. So they're interchangeable. You can switch between them, okay? So to switch between them, let's look at this example. All you're doing is basically dividing that numerator by its denominator. So you can go ahead and do your long division out. Easiest way to do it. And then, remember in our decimal unit, we would keep going. We'd add a decimal and a 0. But we're talking about fractions, so we don't want to keep going. So what you do with what you would call a remainder when you were younger, that 2, all that means is 2 still needs to be divided by 3. Okay, so that means it's 2/3 left. So 785 thirds is the same thing as 261 and 2/3. So you can use that remainder to make your fraction. All you're doing is dividing it by the number that was dividing into it. So remember, the fraction bar means division. So that's turning an improper to a mixed number. If we want to turn a mixed number to an improper, we have 35 and 5/6. Well, we already have 5/6 as a fraction. I need the 35 to be a fraction. So what would 35 be if it was in 6, right? Right now 35 is over 1, but I want it to be in 6, okay? So I need 35 times 6, basically. So 35 times 6 is 210/6. But don't forget about the 5/6 we already had, so we gotta add that in. So all together, that's 215/6. That 35 and 5/6 is, okay? So all you're doing is taking the whole number, making it into a fraction with that common denominator, and then adding in the fraction you already had. So that's converting between mixed numbers and improper fractions. Finally, our last thing we're going to review is turning a fraction into a decimal and a decimal into a fraction. So very similar to what we did. Remember, the fraction bar means division. We're going to divide. It's 19 divided by 25. So take 19, and I'm dividing it by 25. Now this time, I want it to turn into a decimal, so I'm going to add that decimal point. 25 doesn't go into 19 at all. So how many times does 25 go into 190? So you want to think that out. This one is 7 times. And then add a 0, bring it down. And then 25 goes into 150 6 times. So you just keep going until you get nothing left, and that's your answer. So 19/25 is the same as 0.76. So that's that decimal. Now, you may have noticed a quicker way. Some people notice that if I have 19/25, if I multiply the numerator and denominator by 4, I get 76 hundredths. And 76 hundredths, well, that's also 76 hundredths. So that's a shortcut. The problem is not all denominators are going to easily go into a 10 or 100 or 1,000. So if you're someone who likes just one method to do everything, remember the division method, because that works every single time. All right, so if we're talking about a mixed number, it's going to be the same thing. It's 8 2/3, so it's still going to be 8 point something, right? The 8 isn't going to change. That's a whole number. All we're doing is taking the fraction and turning it into a decimal. So I'm going to take my fraction, I'm going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So 3 goes into 26 times. And then I notice, look, I'm going into 20 again. So no matter what, since I'm going into the same number, as soon as you notice you're going into the same number, your number is what we call repeating, okay? So it's going to be 6 again and again and again, no matter what you do, because you keep bringing down the 0. 3 is going to go into 26 times no matter what. So the way that you show that that's repeating is you put a line over top of it. So this is 8.6 repeating. 8 2/3 is equivalent to 8.6 repeating. So we have 2 different kinds of decimal we talked about there. The repeating, like we just saw, a decimal that goes on forever in a pattern. It goes on forever in a pattern. And then we have terminating decimals, or decimals that end. Terminate, like the Terminator, he ends people's lives. So decimals that end. You want to be careful with repeating decimals. I'm going to show you an example how you write them. If I want to show this number as a repeating decimal, I want to make sure I write it like that, because if I were to write it like this, that actually is not the same thing. That would be 0.757, and then it would start repeating again, 757. You notice how there's a double 7 there. So be really careful, because some people accidentally write it incorrectly and don't represent the number they mean. So be careful when you're writing out your repeating decimals. All right, so I'm going to pause it, let you go ahead and turn this. We're turning into a decimal. Okay, you're not turning into a fraction, turn it into a decimal. And hit play to see what your answer is, if your answer is correct. So remember to divide the numerator by the denominator. Only goes in one time. 6 times. And at this point, if we were going to do the fraction, I would do 6/9, right? But I'm not. I want a decimal, so I'm going to add a 0 and keep going. And notice, look, I got 60 again. So when I put the 6 up here, I know it's repeating, because no matter what, I'm going to keep getting 60 I'm going into. So my answer for 159ths is 16.6 repeating as a decimal. All right, now we're going to talk about turning decimals into fractions. It is actually way easier. All you have to do is just say it. When I say just say it, you want to say the number properly. That number is 6/10. 6/10. 6/10 can be written as a decimal like that, or as a fraction like this, 6/10. Okay? And then once you say it and you've written it, all you have left to do is simplify it. So make sure you simplify those fractions. So 0.6 is equivalent to 3/5. All you have to do is say it the proper way to say it. So go ahead and pause it and do this one. Don't forget to simplify it and then hit play to see the answer. All right, so this is going to be 4 85/100ths. If you don't know your place values very well, all you have to do is count, and the number of places should be equal to the number of zeros. Okay? And then I can start dividing by 5 to simplify it. So that's 25, that's 17, and then I'm done, because those are both as simple as it's going to get. So 4 17/20ths is the correct answer for that one. All right, I guess pause it and then hit play to check your answer. All right, this one is 6 and 8, and then that's 10/100ths. Make sure you wrote 1,000 and didn't accidentally do 8/10. That's a common mistake. That would be 6.8, not 6.008. All we have left to do is simplify it. It is fine if you want to just divide by 2 until you get the answer. But if you can jump straight to the final answer, that's fine too, okay? Which is 6 and 1 125th. So don't forget to simplify those fractions once you've written it out.